The following is a presentation on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, written by Mark Twain in 1885. This is the oldest novel that we're going to be working with, so you're going to need the most support in terms of background information and historical context in order to fully get it. Hopefully, this presentation will provide you with that and help to enrich your understanding and enjoyment of this novel. Before we go any further, you're going to need the following materials: your regular notebook, something to write with, and a quiet setting so that you can focus and concentrate on the presentation. Feel free to pause and copy notes from the PowerPoint and then resume play to listen to my explanations. If you have everything and you're ready to continue, we can move forward. Being racist versus portraying racism. It's very important that we get this out there right out front. As you read, you will frequently encounter characters using the N-word in a racist and derogatory manner. Does this mean that the book itself is racist? Does this mean that Mark Twain is racist? Actually, we read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn for its pointed representations of cognitive dissonance, how hypocritical people have to be in order to justify racism to themselves. Mark Twain criticizes the hypocrisy and irony of the American South and criticizes racist perspectives. So we can safely say that the book is not racist. If he was using the N-word out of hatred or to get a laugh, you would certainly say that that book is racist. But based on Mark Twain's personality and character and history, as well as the criticism of the book, we can safely say that this is an acceptable book to read. In order to understand Huckleberry Finn, you're also going to understand The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is actually a sequel to Mark Twain's novel The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn are best friends, and Tom Sawyer actually appears in this novel. Tom Sawyer is a smart, moral kid with an overactive imagination, whereas Huckleberry Finn is a street-smart kid with a good conscience despite his rough upbringing. In The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, both Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn come into the possession of lots of gold coins, and you'll hear this mentioned and referred to at the beginning of Huckleberry Finn. The novel takes place during the Plantation era, also known as the Southern Antebellum period. This era stretches from the late 1700s, essentially the beginning of America, all the way to the start of the American Civil War in 1861. During this time period, the South consisted of slave states where slavery was legal and the basis of their economic success, and the North consisted of free states where segregation and racism were still very common, but slavery was illegal. Free states versus slave states. As of 1846, the time frame of this novel, the free states were Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois, whereas the slave states were Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas. The states were organized into slave states and free states based on the Mason-Dixon line, but there was furious debate over the country's westward expansion. As the country continued to move west, the South and the North were in constant debate over whether the new states would become free or slave states. Geography. And we need to start with a common misconception, and one that I had before I began the novel. Missouri is below Illinois. If you told me those two states, I would say that Missouri was definitely south. Here's the facts. Although Illinois stretches higher than Missouri, and Missouri stretches lower than Illinois, so we're kind of right, they have a significant amount of overlap. The Missouri River makes up the border between the two states and eventually flows into the Mississippi River. In the book, Huck starts in a city at the top of Missouri, a slave state, and attempts to sail south to a city at the bottom of Illinois, a free state. This geography shows the hypocrisy of the situation. Huck and Jim sail south to get free? And if they crossed from one riverbank to another, Jim would be free? Look at this map. The only thing separating Jim from being a slave to a free man was geography. Does this make sense? How hypocritical or ironic is this? These are the types of attitudes that Mark Twain is criticizing. The abolitionist movement. The abolitionist movement was an attempt to end slavery, racial segregation, and racism. The movement really began to pick up in the decades before the Civil War. Mark Twain was a member of the abolitionist movement, which is part of why we see The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as a text that portrays racism rather than is racist, despite the repeated use of the N-word. Mark Twain was trying to end slavery. Steamboats. With the production of the first American steamboat, people were able to travel upriver and north in a timely and efficient fashion for the first time. Before this time period, flowing south along a river made sense, but going north and fighting the current wouldn't have made any sense. But now we have steamboats. And steamboats play a major role in the plot as Huck Finn and Jim try to sail south to get on a steamboat and escape north. Mark Twain's first job was working on a steamboat. His real name was actually Samuel Clemens, but he took his name from a common shout on steamboats. Mark was used as a verb meaning to count, and Twain had an old definition meaning two. So if somebody yelled Mark Twain on a steamboat, that meant that they were able to count 2 fathoms, which is a nautical measurement of 6 feet. So that meant that the river was deep enough to sail. A picaresque. A picaresque is a type of novel which is made up of a series of short episodes. In a picaresque, a stock main character, meaning someone whose personality doesn't really change, moves throughout different places and meets different types of people that represent different aspects of society. So, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a picaresque to the extent that Huck Finn and Jim travel down the Mississippi River and meet different types of people in a number of different towns. You should also understand local color. Local color is a genre of writing in which the author tries to give a crystal clear impression of a very specific time and place. So for 2 examples, the novel Cannery Row by John Steinbeck gives exact descriptions of the town of Monterey, California, down to street names and buildings. Another example, the novel Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton, gives the exact feel of winters in small towns in New England. Huck Finn is an example of local color to the extent that he gives very specific geographic descriptions, and also the accents of characters change as they move further down the river. You also need to know or understand confidence men. A confidence man, also known as a snake oil salesman, was somebody who moved from town to town with the attempt of getting money and moving on before they are caught. Remember, we are well before the days of the internet and social media, so news didn't travel anywhere near as fast. Confidence men got their money through building people's trust and then tricking them by selling faulty goods, stealing, or putting on shows. Because news and information moved so slowly, however, they were usually able to escape to the next town before they were caught.